Like, I'm already now. Well, I went there on Monday to see about the guy Tuesday night. No, I'm trying to. Had to get it on the smell. Nobody was sitting.
I guess we had thought that.
Real time. Good. How you guys doing? Thank you, man. Okay. It's happened out of 2 weeks ago. So, yes. All right, let's bring this meeting to order. This is the meeting of the City of Harbor Springs, Michigan Planning Commission. And today is Thursday, December 5th, 2024. It's 5:30 p.m. local time. And welcome. Thank you, everyone who came out tonight. And when I'm watching these replays, I always wonder how many people are in the audience. I can't see. So I'm estimating about 35 people in the audience. And that pretty much fills up the room. And I can tell you, if you're watching this remotely, that the crowd is spirited, they're interested, and they're looking pretty cheerful. So really do appreciate you coming out tonight. It's not that nice of a night. For our residents who are not with us during the off season, tonight's one of those nights that you might not enjoy that much. We're here and we're working for you. So all right, Jeff, can you start us with the roll call, please?
Rick Tarczynski.
Here.
Vanessa Warren.
Here.
Emily Dubay.
Here.
Bob Thoma.
Here.
Tony Johnson.
Here.
Bill Mulder.
Here.
Mark Boudet.
Here.
Barry Lesker.
Here.
Michael Behrman.
Here.
And our student representative, Annika Alonzi. We have a forum.
Pardon my voice, it could get a little rough. And next thing on the agenda is approval of minutes. And Jeff, do we have anything?
No, this is a special meeting. We don't do them.
We have any minutes because this is a special meeting. All right. Do we have any public comment or correspondence? This is the time where people can make a comment about something that's not on the agenda for tonight. We have about 3 minutes to do that. And it could be anything that you think the planning commission needs to know.
Hi, Karen Hofield, Birchwood. I wanted to talk to you guys about Zoom technology. And I don't know if Bill is here or Bob. Is it Donahue? Who's your tech guy? Donna. Bill McDonough. McCullough. Anyway, so a lot of the people when we get home, they call up and text and say that they don't see the maps. It's hard to get a hold of Victor when they want to see something, but we don't turn on the chat. And so we are hoping that we might be able to improve our Zoom camera. There's something called the OWL that will circle around and it will show everyone's face when they're talking. And we think that for the next groups of meetings, it would be great to be able to see the people that are talking. Lots of the Zoom participants don't know who's talking from the board. I don't think you guys have to give your names and things like that, but with a better camera, you would be able to see your faces and things like that. And then I think that's really all I have to say tonight. Thank you. And so we'd like to have some improvement if we could. Thank you.
Is Birchwood gonna pay for that?
Actually, the We Love Harbor Springs will offer to buy the owl. Yes.
Linda.
My favorite is the gym. It's not nothing. I went to Rockwood, I turn it on. I did this with Kmart, and I had everybody in the store. Kmart shopping, anyway, I digress. I just wanted to get up, thank you all, before we start this new process, for all of the hours and effort you put into the whole new zoning code. But I know how, I believe you did it in good faith, wanting the best for Harbor Springs. And I appreciate it thoroughly. Did I think it was perfect? Probably not. I didn't know enough to know whether it's perfect or not, but I knew it could be amended. So I was all for its passage. I'd like to start, so I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for not bailing on all of the insults and accusations and whatever else you've had to put up with over these last several months. It reminds me of a story that a first grade teacher told me, and it's supposedly true. Johnny went to first grade, first day of school. At noon, he put on his coat and gathered up his things. And the teacher said, "Johnny, where are you going?" And he said, "Well, I go home for lunch." And she patiently said, "No, Johnny, now you're in first grade. You go to the cafeteria with the other kids, and then we come back here and have more school." And he looked up at her in horror and said, "Who the hell signed me up for this?" You have to have felt that.
Thank you. All right, anybody on Zoom have their hands up?
Yeah, Robert Hall.
Robert Hall.
Hey, good evening. Thank you very much. Robert Hall, 409 Glen Drive. First of all, I want to reiterate what the lady just said there. There was an enormous amount of effort that went into this. And here we are. It appears that the Planning and Zoning Committee is about to do the right thing by the will of a majority of the voters of Harbor Springs and lift the moratorium perhaps after and return us to the original zoning code. As a gesture of peace, nothing could be more profound, I think, at the moment. However, it's briefly worth noting for everyone this evening, after all this enormous hard work by the commission, how we got here tonight and how we can all move forward. Once the contents of Ordinance 439, which threatened to change the future of Harbor Springs forever with no way back due to legal elements called by right built into it, it set off a firestorm of debate and ultimately protest by the full-time voter residents of Harbor Springs. Part of the motivation for this thing was called demographics. In other words, kind of like all of us in this town were getting too old, and that wasn't much of a selling point. There were charges of conflicts of interest too, but the greatest conflict of interest was this. After all the work that was put into this, that this ordinance was in conflict with the interests of a majority of the voters. That was the beginning of a chain of events that led to a Harbor Springs public uprising. There were 7 official acts of protest that followed. First was 1,200 signatures on change.org. Second was a petition from over 20% of the landowners in Harbor Springs that were against it. It was overridden by the city council. Next was a petition by enough full-time voting residents of the city to legally force a referendum on the ordinance. This too was almost rejected by the former city council, but cooler heads prevailed and it was put on the November ballot. Next, this, sorry for the term, but pro-developer ordinance, and there is no other way to describe it by most people, was overwhelmingly defeated by a majority of voters, killing it once and for all. On top of that, the two biggest proponents of Ordinance 439 running for city council were soundly defeated by voters who elected Tom Graham and Wendy Reeves. It's a shame that it all came down to this. Again, after all this hard work, but here we are. We all know there are things in the old ordinance that need updating, but Ordinance 439 just went too far. Working with commission members over the next few months, perhaps we can come up with an updated ordinance that improves on the old one that gains the widest possible acceptance. I'm sure we all want that. An updated ordinance that can pass the city council in the spring by a 5-0 vote. Imagine that. Unanimous. That word sounds awfully good right now. It can be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, kind of on the agenda, you're right, Vanessa, but
Hands iPad.
it's been said. Hands iPad, come in.
Yeah, hi, Anna Askew, 153 Zoll Street. The first woman talked about the Zoom experience, and all we're looking at is the agenda right now. Can you please switch the camera view so we can actually see the room? That would be helpful for us to follow along. Thank you.
Yeah, Victor will try to do both. He's also going to be scrambling to predict different documents as we need them and those kind of things.
I think that these meetings is the way the it's set up is for those that are in attendance, if we take off what's on the screen, then they're only looking at people's faces on Zoom. The people in attendance should be looking at the documents that the planning commission is looking at. So that's why we have the documents on Zoom and displayed on the screen. So yes, I understand it's hard for people on Zoom to see in a small screen, but primarily the people in attendance should be looking at the same materials that the planning commission.
Okay. Well, then, shall we get to it? Yes, ma'am.
To go forward,
You introduce yourself, please.
Lisa Moore, 7997 South. As you go forward with your agenda for new and old business, I have a copy of what I think is a 40-year-old Harbor Springs City Code that mentions on the first day of January 1982. Okay, Article 6 says there should be a historical commission. Article 7 says there should be a downtown development authority. Today, we have the DDA, but we don't have a historical commission. Okay, so we need a historic preservation committee to identify, inventory, and survey the buildings, features, and other artifacts that are important to us. Then help people to preserve and protect them. No, we didn't say anything about regulating what people can or cannot do. Our goal is to educate and raise the value in historic structures and artifacts that we have so that people want to preserve and protect them. Your current master plan has historic and historic charm written all over it. How can you preserve that if you don't have a historic commission? So such a commission can and should include people who show up, who know the town, who know historic preservation, or have an interest in preserving the small town charm of Harbor Springs. It's one of the reasons I moved here 25 years ago and restored a home up on Lakeshore Drive. Number 3 of 5 homes that I've restored over the last 40 years. Okay, so a group of people has been meeting since July of this year to begin an organization interested in preserving the historic structures and artifacts of the greater Harbor Springs area, not just the city of Harbor Springs, because part of Weequahic is not in the city. Forest Beach and Pine Trail are not in the city, and other places around here that have historic structures or things of historic significance aren't necessarily in the city. Okay, this group of volunteers would be very interested in assisting the city of Harbor Springs with forming that historic commission. And while many of us don't live in the city and can't be on the commission, we have a number of architects already in the room, Rick, Mark, okay? We have other people, resources in our group that are historic preservationists, people like me who have 40 years of work on hand, historic preservation work, and we're here to offer to help. So as you go forward with your, whatever you do with the zoning plan, whether you adopt the old one, you do a new one, you put the newest one in place, whatever, there should be a historic commission aspect and input to it, just like the DDA has input to it, just like the Parks and Recreation has input into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Victor, the planning commission doesn't have the ability to form a historic commission, does it? Or is that a city level? City council. City council? Well,
And I believe there was a specific reason that a historical commission was originally in the city code. And there's, once I think the Historical Society was formed, that commission dissolved. Am I correct, Jim?
that is correct.
Yeah, so that's the history of it. Doesn't mean you can't form another history commission, but that's the history of the history commission.
The Historic Society is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit.
I know, I understand that. I'm just explaining the history of why it was in the city code and why it's no longer in existence. So once the Historical Society came to be, the Historical Commission dissolved.
Okay, so a group of residents could make a proposal to city council if they wanted to, right? All right. Great. Thank you very much. All right, so the first thing on the agenda is a public hearing on the readoption of the 2005 zoning code as amended through February 7, 2022. And Victor, do you want to set this up for us?
Okay, so after planning commission recommended that city council establish a moratorium on issuing zoning permits, and that moratorium lasts until December 12th or 11th, I believe. And part of the reason was planning commission wanted to have, well, we needed to have a public hearing based on Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, which states that in order to adopt zoning ordinance, you must have a public hearing at the planning commission. So after the repeal of ordinance 439, in order to mitigate any legal risk, city attorney and I believe that adopting an ordinance to establish the previous zoning code as the current zoning code wouldn't need a public hearing, and that would be the best course of action. So right now you have in front of you is ordinance 440, which is a readoption of the zoning code prior to ordinance 439. This would ensure that we comply with the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, that we hold a public hearing before adopting a zoning ordinance.
Okay, and I acknowledge there was controversy about whether the old zoning was back into effect automatically or if it wasn't. We took the approach of being extra sure, and unfortunately, we recommended a zoning moratorium. City council agreed. They've done that. That's where we are. But here we are already now to decide, do we recommend to city council that they put the old one back into effect affirmatively, just to be triply sure that the city is protected. So that's what we're here for. City or planning commission members, do you have any comments or questions first before we open it up to the public?
Yeah, Victor, if we suggest to council that we re-adopt the old code, can they do it at their next meeting, or do they have to post a 15-day notice and have a hearing for that?
No, city council can re-adopt the code at this meeting on December 9th, or a special meeting before that if they wanted to, but no, they do not have to do the 15-day public hearing, 15-day notice for a public hearing. That's only required for, only one public hearing is required for the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act to be held by the planning commission. They can choose to have a public hearing if they want, but they don't have.
All right, should we open it up for public comment? All right, members of the public. Oh, we have a motion to do that?
Motion. Motion to open the public
We
hearing.
have a motion to open the public hearing, please.
I'll make a motion to open public hearing.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, public hearing is open. And I had a request from planning commission member that we ask City of Harbor Springs residents and property owners if they could go first with their comments, and then we'll circle around to our neighbors. And then we would also ask that everybody speak one time until everyone else has had a chance, and if you want to say something, we'll circle back to you. So, City of Harbor Springs residents and property owners, anybody have any comments on whether we should recommend to City Council to readopt the old zoning code?
I have a question. Lisa Nichols, 638 West Bluff Drive, registered voter. If we do adopt it to go back at the city council meeting, how long will we have that? Until we have our meetings and come up with what our changes might be? Because I don't want the old one forever. So, because there's a lot of things in it that aren't good. I guess that's what would be the timing if we have this one so that some of the buildings can go forward? How long are we gonna have to hang on to it?
Good question. It's City Council would decide that. Yeah, City Council would decide that. They're the ones who have the authority to enact changes to the zoning code or not. So that's in their hands. Our timeline, Victor, do you have our timeline handy that you could project?
It's small.
Yeah, so let me. Essentially, what we've got are two preparation meetings during the month of December. This is the first of them. And then in the month of January, we have 2 meetings, in the month of February, 2 meetings, in the month of March, 2 meetings. And based on the schedule, that takes us to a zipped up recommendation that we could transmit to City Council. So it would be in their ballpark after that. So 6 more meetings, well, 1 more in 2024, and then 6 meetings in 2025, January, February, March to get us there. And then that's up to them. So. Chip.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm Chip Everest at 4 Beach Drive, a registered voter and a property owner in Harbor Springs. I recommend we go back to the old code so that we can be open for business. That we diligently work for making changes that has broader community support, like that's been mentioned. I don't recommend putting a date certain on when that should be done. I don't like it. I don't like to tie our hands. I think we should have a commitment to work forward, but I don't think we should tie our hands on a date certain. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody on Zoom? Well, there's a pause in the room.
Maureen Kenny.
Maureen Kenny, go ahead.
Hi there. One question I have about this calendar that's posted. First of all, the one that was posted originally in the agenda and the packet was the wrong one. So I appreciate, Bill, you trying to recap it in verbal, but we never really saw that in the packet. So that's issue number 1 with me. And then issue number 2, it's a very aggressive timeline. It's December, it's Christmas. We need to spend time with our families. And secondly, I do not see anything on that calendar that asks for public participation in terms of town halls, open meetings with city council and planning commission members. We're going down the same path that we got us into this mess, that the public was not included. So I ask all of you sitting at that table to include the public in multiple forums. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Maureen. We did touch on that last time, and there were some suggestions about how we might be able to get more public engagement. And We're still kicking those around and looking for some more input tonight, actually, and how those could fold into the schedule. So we're wide open. And I'm sorry that the wrong document was prepped in advance there.
Correct document is on the homepage of the website.
Who else do we have? The Zoom hand up?
See all those.
Hello, Charles Wilson, 181 West Main Street. I agree with what has just been said. It's time to readopt the old code and so that we can have clarity, especially for folks that have projects that they want to move forward. I also think that the timeline that has been suggested it just doesn't make sense. It's just not enough time in order to get input from all residents. I would be concerned that decisions are going to be made in an echo chamber. And again, similar to what was just said, I'd be concerned about going down the same road that we went down the first time around. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Are there other Zoom hands up, or that's leftover? Okay. All right. Any other comments in the room about readopting the old zoning? Okay. Then, yep.
I'm Carol Winard, 141 Snyder Street, registered voter and full-time resident of Harbor Springs. I'm a little surprised about the concept of you rushed through it, because my understanding, correct me if you're wrong, I'm wrong. Spent 22 months working on the new zoning code. I believe there were 2 or 3 public hearings, 2 or 3 presentations to City Council, and all the planning commission meetings. I believe people can attend by Zoom. So this idea that they rushed it through just seems disingenuous to me. So I would support Lisa's suggestion that there is a timeline. If we do go back to the previous zoning code to get something resolved, but it doesn't seem to me that we're rushing through anything after probably now 25 months.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we've heard what people need to say. We would need a motion
Mr.
to
Chairman,
close the public hearing.
We have one more on Zoom as well.
One more on Zoom. All right, let's go to Zoom first.
And
iPad.
Yeah, hi, this is Peter Askew, 153 Zoll Street. I have a couple of things I'd like to say. One is that I would ask that you consider when you get into the conversations with residents and voters that the commission doesn't operate through subcommittees where there's no notice requirements, no minutes are taken, and there's no record of any of those conversations. I think that was something that was used extensively the last time, and I think that's just wrong to do it that way. Keeps everybody in the dark. The other question I wanted to ask is, in looking at the first page of the exhibit that you have posted there, it talks about and everyone says reinstating the old zoning code. Has anything been changed in the old, quote unquote, old zoning code? There's a language in here that talks about, amend, revise, and restate, and it lists a bunch of sections and things like that. And I haven't gone through the entire document sitting here right now, but are there any changes that were made to the quote unquote old zoning code that you might want to make people aware of it, or if they haven't, then that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go over to City Attorney Jim Raymer on it.
Another good question.
The proposal is to adopt the code as it existed immediately prior to the adoption of the new code. So there have been no changes made other than those that were previously made.
Thank you very much. Okay, back to the room. Was there one more comment?
Linda Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street. Something has to be said about civic responsibility. I was, throughout this process, flabbergasted when the opposition said there was no public input and there was no, because I came to several meetings where there would be 6 people, 8 people. I remember one in the summer, there might have been 12 of us here. And I think I have maintained from the beginning that the commission and the council have attempted to share every detail of this process all along the way. And I think we can have the meetings. It doesn't seem fair to me to ask you all or the staff or whatever to go over all of the meetings that you had a couple of years ago because people were not paying attention. They say they didn't know, they were busy. Well, I assume the 9 of you that served were pretty busy too. And so let's consider civic responsibility. The more input we can get, great. But I don't feel it's your responsibility or your responsibility to get people here. It's their responsibility to come.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Really, the issue tonight for the public hearing is should we adopt the old zoning code or not? We're getting into a lot of details about process going forward, which is great, but it's not exactly the subject for the public hearing.
Hi, Karen Offield, Birchwood. I think we should, from the people that live outside, the idea of dropping the moratorium and readopting the old zoning is a terrific idea. I also agree with Chip that we shouldn't put a deadline on it. There shouldn't be a sunset or anything like that. We want the process to work through itself. To respond to this idea of civic responsibility, everyone is now paying attention. When the Beckett and Rader and the city of Harbor Springs put the zoning out there in March, beginning February, March 2024, they had on a schedule that there would be a final approval in October or December, and that's right now. And so they were giving the community about 5 months to vet the new zoning. And so I'm not saying 5 or 6 months or anything like that, but if we can take this moratorium off tonight, and then the really big thing that I'm up here to say is that could we please change the December 19th meeting? All I do is, think about zoning and things like that. And if we could start after the first of the year, when everybody is newly seated on the boards, I bet you would make everybody here very happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Cindy Randazzo, 2244 Pinecrest Street.
You turn it off.
Did I turn, where's that? Sorry about that. Cindy Randazzo, 2244 Pinecrest Street, virtually. I haven't attended a lot of meetings, and to the point of someone saying that I missed, the big 22-month process, she's correct. But I also was someone who worked in government in New Jersey for many years. And I also had the purview of 565 municipalities, and communication is key. And sometimes you don't always get communicated to, and you could do it, many different ways, but still not catch everybody. And I always felt that if you do have a group of people, and by this last election, there was a swath of people, that it's never a bad idea to take a pause and to include everybody. You know, that's not to say you have to go, you know, for everything that you did last time. Obviously, there was some things thrown in there that people didn't care for. So, you know, start fresh. You know, get people included, and there's many ways to get them included. What I've heard and what I've seen, and I've attended a couple of meetings, it just seems like you're trying to close some people out. And so I would, first of all, want the moratorium lifted, and I want the last document reinstated, and then a break. Let's start after the new year and let's get everybody engaged. It's not that difficult. And I've done it for everything from tritium leaks and nuclear power plants to everything in between, and 75 different environmental programs. So talk about problem solving on steroids. So there is a way to get everybody included. This is a small little town. It shouldn't be hard. This shouldn't be a big ask. So include, you know, and I know you're always saying, if you're not in the town proper, but I live in Birchwood. It took me 20 years to get back here. And I do want to be able to, you know, have some input on this, because this is my town. Just because I live in Birchwood, a few miles out, this is my town. So, you know, the more you can include us in some of the deciding, you know, or at least in the conversation, we really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Looks like folks have had their say, so I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Vote to close the public hearing.
We have a
Second.
motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right, the public hearing is closed. Now it's back to the planning commission. to Talk about what we think is the best approach on recommending the council whether or not re-implement the old zoning code. Any thoughts?
I'm willing to take the first stab at that. I think it's fairly clear that this process is going to take some time, 3-4 months. And you know, certainly from the feedback we've received tonight, people want to certainly keep business moving forward. So I think reinstating the old code, while it's not certainly my first choice, is probably the right path forward. So I would definitely support a recommendation to council in that effect. And then secondly, on the public input, I'd be certainly very open to the idea of some town halls to further that outreach with the residents.
Does a decision involving reinstate, I'm sorry.
Does a decision involving going back to the old code and doing away with the moratorium, is that the responsibility of city council? Planning commission can't make that decision tonight.
Let's get the official.
That's correct. So Jim,
We would need a recommendation from the planning commission.
the planning commission would recommend.
That's a decision the planning commission must make.
The
That
council,
could happen at the next meeting. This is kind of dragging along in bureaucracy.
Yeah, and city council meets Monday night. Monday night, right. 4 days from now.
And should they decide to do this, will that take effect immediately?
There's a there's a 10-day requirement under our charter after the ordinance would be adopted. However, the moratorium by its own terms ends on December the 11th. So
I'm trying to get some of these guys moving.
So that will, unless council choose, for whatever reason, would choose to extend it.
Or council could stop the moratorium on December 9th.
They could.
The night of their meeting, if they were to pass.
Yes.
Jim, I know there's the 10-day wait on any action taken by city council, but isn't there also that other part that if we post in 10 locations, that it can take effect immediately?
Well, not under the ZEA. I did look at this. Under the ZEA is a minimum of 7 days or such later date as is provided by ordinance or charter. In our charter, it says 10 days, so.
Okay. Any other planning commissioners have thoughts they'd like to express?
I pretty much support the gentleman here to my right, what he said. And, you know, I do think that, you know, this is the way to go. We've gotten here for a whole lot of reasons, and it certainly makes sense to do it. I also think it's a good idea to perhaps consider that, you know, given that we're gonna have new members on this committee after the first of the year, that we, instead of having a meeting on the 19th about this and have to redo a lot on the next meeting, and maybe we should talk about that. Do we think this would be too much redo, you know, to revisit topics, you know, for the new members? Just something to think about. And the other thing is, I do think, I would also like to emphasize that this should be done in a timely fashion. It doesn't have to be a drop dead date, it has to be done by this point, but I think everybody should deal in good faith, make sure that we're, you know, moving this along so we don't get dragged down and more bureaucracy. And because things do have to change, there are things in the old code that really work against Harbor Springs. And I think the organization alone in the new code that we're going to be amending is, you know, makes life so much easier for builders and architects and property owners. Just the structure of the document itself is a huge step forward. So I would not want to see this get drug out forever. You know, whether it's 3-4 months, it's going to take the time it takes, but I think it should be emphasized that people who are involved, you know, are there to participate and to move it forward. Thank you. Oh, nice to meet you.
I'll ask this question now, or I could wait till Monday night to ask it, but since I'm here and I'm just a little bit confused on something. Of course, it doesn't take me much to get confused, but Jim, the question I have, the moratorium in the document and or in the current moratorium ends December 11th, correct?
Yes.
So if the recommendation is from Planning Commission is to adopt this new ordinance, there's that 10-day waiting period. I guess the question I have, realistically, how does that work if a builder came in on December 11th and wanted to pull a permit, or December 12th or whatever? There's no more moratorium, but yet there's, this ordinance doesn't go into effect for 10 days. You have said before, you believe that we're operating under the former zoning code. So what happens in that case?
Well, I think this is something I would have to talk with the city manager about, but and I think I'd prefer to do that. My personal view on this would be that the you know, the old code, that the prior code is already in effect. That what we're doing, what you'd be proposing tonight is to add a, you know, a safety net, if you will, just so that there cannot be a question about it. My suggestion to the city manager would be to, assuming that council did ratify the old code on the Monday night, that between that date and the date that the old code was legally published and so forth, that permits could be issued.
And I certainly didn't mean to put you on the spot or anything like that. It's a question I have you know, based on the provisions of ordinance 440. So thank you.
Any other thoughts at the table here?
Yeah, Bill, I think also we need to come up with a game plan for how we're gonna interact and present these meetings and work together. So I think obviously what we've been doing hasn't been working well, but if we could come up with a plan maybe on the 19th to figure out a good game plan to run these meetings and what that looks like.
Great. All right, it sounds like we're coalescing and getting ready to make a decision here. Is anyone care to make a motion? Jim, do you want to state what a desired motion would be?
If the planning commission was so inclined, I would recommend that a motion be adopted to recommend that the city council adopt ordinance number 440 that has been presented to the planning commission tonight.
So moved.
The moratorium would be dropped.
Well, that would be city council.
That's city council.
Okay. It's up to them. I guess we could recommend, yes, drop the moratorium immediately.
Why don't you do that in 2 stages?
Okay.
Let's take first the possible adoption, the recommendation as to ordinance number 440.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Bob. And let's do a roll call vote on this one.
Michael Merriman,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Tony Johnson,
Yes.
Bob Thomas,
Yes.
Emily DeVay,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And then, Jim, are you suggesting that we do a separate motion if we would recommend the city council
Terminate
terminate the moratorium?
If that's something that someone wanted to make a motion for, you could certainly do that.
Yeah, sounds like we have a motion for that from Bob. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mark Boudet. Any discussion on that? All right, why don't we do a roll call vote on that one too, Jeff?
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Michael Merriman,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Emily DeVay,
Yes.
Bob Thomas,
Yes.
Tony Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, that closes out that item on our agenda. And the next thing on the agenda, and the only other thing on the agenda, that stated right now, is to see the results of the zoning survey. And we don't have to decide anything tonight. We don't have to, there's nothing in our plan that says we're gonna take any actions. This is just about learning. And Victor's gonna take us through what we've learned.
All right, thank you, Bill. All right, so the Harbor Springs zoning code survey, just a basic overview. Everyone knows this stuff, but this is just outlining the process here. So the voters repealed ordinance 439. The planning commission, from their opinions, believed that ordinance 439 was aligned with the master plan goals. The same exact ordinance cannot be adopted within 1 year after its repeal. So the planning commission would still like to adopt the new zoning code, which I think is evident from tonight's discussion. And they would like to use ordinance 439 as that template. That's what we heard in previous meetings. So we know that some changes must be made because you cannot adopt the same exact ordinance. And those changes should reflect further community input. Surveys are one tool for obtaining community input, and the results can act as a guide for possible changes. They're not end all be all, but they do provide some direction, some insight in what some residents who respond to surveys think about certain zoning topics that were asked. So some basic demographic questions. We had just shy of 300 total responses. 172 of them identified as Harbor Springs residents. The rest were from the various townships, except for about 10 who said they did not live in Emmett County. We asked a question about if they were an employee in Harbor Springs, and 56 respondents said they worked in Harbor Springs. That includes those who lived in the city and those who live in townships. And then we asked the question, are you a seasonal resident? We have 52 responses that said they were seasonal residents, which is about 1/6 of their responses. One question we asked was, how many zoning districts should there be in the city? As you see, the vast majority believe there should be 6 to 10 or 1 to 5, so fewer than 10 zoning districts. You do have a substantial number of people there, 38 that took the survey, that said they don't know. And I should clarify that these results you see on your screen are City of Harbor Springs responses only. So when we're looking at City of Harbor Springs residents, that's how they felt about how many zoning districts there should be in the city. When we come to downtown building height, again, City of Harbor Springs responses only. Out of about 165 responses, people who answered that question, 90 believe the maximum number of floors should be 3 stories, 39 believe it should be 4 or more stories, and 35 respondents said it should be 2 stories. So that equates to about 55% believe it should be 3 floors, 24% 4 or more floors, and 21% 2 floors. We asked the question whether a reasonable maximum height limit for commercial and mixed-use buildings. Get a wider range of responses there. Ultimately, about 40% believe it should be between 31 and 40 feet. 42% believe that maximum height limit should be greater than 40 feet, and 17% believe it should be up to 30 feet. Question whether rooftop decks should be allowed on downtown buildings in Harbor Springs. About 3/4 said that yes, they should be allowed. We asked a question about people's idea of what the size of downtown, the boundaries of downtown of Harbor Springs are. And the reason was this, asking this question was to get an idea of where they think the previous questions that we asked about how tall buildings should be, where they're envisioning downtown is for building height and et cetera. And 1/3 of respondents selected the correct boundaries. 2/3 of respondents guessed that downtown Harbor Springs is larger than it actually is for our downtown district boundaries.
So that was the DDA?
The DDA boundaries, which is larger than the CBD.
Yeah.
boundary. So moving on to housing, we had 15 images of houses, various sizes and various styles and types. We asked respondents to rate the houses on their appropriateness for Harbor Springs and the character of Harbor Springs. The top 3 answers for the most appropriate types of homes were the same for those who live in the city and for all respondents. So the first home you have is a 4-bedroom, 2,000 square foot house. The second one is a 2-bed house plan, about 900 square feet. And the third most appropriate house was a 2-bed traditional cottage ADU at 750 square feet. These numbers of square footage were not on the special pictures. People didn't have that information. Same thing for the top 3 most inappropriate types of houses for Harbor Springs. Again, the top 3 were the same for all respondents. That's for the City of HS Harbor Springs respondents only. We have quite 3 large, and as you can tell by the photos, they're different styles, but the three of the largest homes were picked as the most inappropriate homes for Harbor Springs. So then we asked, what is a reasonable minimum size requirement for a dwelling unit? And it's kind of good to look at this from different demographics. When it comes to all survey respondents and all City of Harbor Springs respondents, about the same breakdown. You have just over half felt that reasonable minimum size requirement for a dwelling unit could be 750 or some lower number. A little bit over 40% said 1,000 square feet or higher. We did have several comments in the other section where people specifically said 864, and you see those are about 5%. For City of Harbor Springs residents who live just below the bluff, once you filter it out just below the bluff, about only 1/3 said 750 square feet or some smaller number was an appropriate minimum size requirement. And nearly 60% said 1,000 square feet or higher would be a more appropriate minimum size requirement. When you ask employees, you get a vastly different response. So people who work in the city but may not live in the city or may live in the city. Nearly 3/4 said 750 square feet or a smaller home would be an appropriate type of minimum size for a house, and about a fourth at 1,000 square feet or higher. Sorry about this. So the next question, should there be a maximum size requirement for a dwelling unit? And this does not include the I don't know responses. We're just looking at yes or no, should there be some sort of maximum size requirement? And for all survey responses and all City of Harbor Springs only responses and employees of businesses in Harbor Springs, they all were about same, around 55% said that there should be some sort of maximum size requirement for dwelling unit. Those numbers kind of flip when you ask only City of Harbor Springs residents who live below the bluff. You had 52% saying there shouldn't be a maximum size requirement for a dwelling. When we asked a question about a reasonable minimum lot size requirement, again, we had several different answers, varying responses. The majority of respondents believe minimum lot size requirement in between 5,000 and 7,000 square feet is most appropriate. You have more that feel under 5,000 is a fine, reasonable minimum lot size compared to those who believe over 7,000 square feet is a reasonable minimum lot size. So we're talking about lot size width. What is a reasonable minimum lot size width? The majority, or 51 to 60 feet is where you have 41 responses for 51 to 60 feet. You have about 40 that think it should be greater than 60 feet, and then you have about 35 that believe it should be lower than 50 feet. So again, a wide variety of responses there, but there are some trends. When it comes to setbacks, front setback, roughly a little bit over half of people felt that 0 to 15 feet was a reasonable front setback, and about 63 people, just under half, felt that 16 feet or higher would be a reasonable front setback. When it comes to side setback, 87 respondents, and this is City of Harbor Springs residents only, 87 respondents felt that reasonable side setback was 0 to 10 feet, while about 60 said it should be 11 feet or greater. You have a little more difference in answers when it comes to rear setback, a little more split. You have a good chunk of people, 37, who think it should be 0 to 10 feet, but the majority think it should be greater than 10 feet, and they're kind of split between the 11 to 20 feet faction of the 21 feet and greater. So that's setbacks. Lot coverage is also, there's wide responses, but we see that, and when we're talking about maximum lot coverage, what we mean is the maximum amount of space on a lot that can be covered by buildings. So whether it's a primary structure or accessory structure. And you have about the highest bracket there was between 41 and 60%, where about a third of residents felt that would be an appropriate maximum lot coverage. You have about just under 30% who believe it should be some number lower, and then you have about 27% who believe it should be higher than 60% lot coverage. Height limits for houses, the majority definitely fell in the 31 to 40 feet category, and a slight majority felt that 3 stories was a reasonable maximum number of floors for a house compared to 2 stories. One of the questions we asked was also, how should housing development occur in Harbor Springs area? And that was to get a feel for, do people want to see houses developed in a certain way versus other ways? Generally, the top 3 responses were pretty much the same for all different categories. If you're looking at City of Harbor Springs residents only, most wanted to see allow for variety in lot shape or configuration. The second most popular answer was allow smaller residential lots. The third most popular was increase the number of dwelling units on properties. Fourth was to sprawl housing in townships, and then the fifth was to allow houses to be taller. As you can tell, those that don't live in the City of Harbor Springs, they think sprawling housing in the townships as their least preferable option. And employees only, if you look at employees only, they differed from the rest of respondents. In that their number one choice was allowing for smaller residential lots to be their first way of having housing developed in Harbor Springs. So then we looked at the approval process for development. And what we asked, we broke up the question in six answers, and we asked people how they felt specific types of development, what process should take place with that specific type of development. They had answers included: there should be no approval necessary, should be approved by the zoning administrator, should be approved by the administrative review committee, and that was one category. Like that was three options, and here it's broken down to this first column. Those are all lumped to there. And then the second column, you see those includes responses for people that say this type of use should not be allowed. It should be reviewed by the planning commission, or it should be a public hearing at the planning commission where neighbors should be notified. For a single family home, about 3/4 believe it should be administrative approval or no approval necessary. For tiny homes or houses that are smaller than others in the neighborhood, just slightly over half believe that no approval should be necessary or should require some sort of administrative approval. Converting to duplex, 60% felt it should either not be allowed or happen at the planning commission level. Renting out a unit in a garage or a house as an ADU, about 2/3 believe that there should be no approval necessary or that it should be administrative approval. When it came to building quote unquote a mansion or a house that's much larger than other houses in the neighborhood, just over 60% felt that should be at the planning commission level or not allowed. Converting to a triplex, about 3/4 believe that should be at the planning commission level. Mother-in-law suite is very similar to the concept of renting out an ADU, but this was specifically just for families, what we consider a mother-in-law suite. And, about 3/4 believe that no approval should be necessary or should be administrative. And we split a home occupation into two categories: home occupations with no employees or customers at the house, and over 4/5 believe that there should be no approval necessary or should be administrative. And then when you have a home occupation with employees or customers, just over half believe it should happen at the planning commission level. There's no type of development where the majority of the respondents thought it shouldn't be allowed. The highest was triplexes, with about 35% stating that triplexes shouldn't be allowed, which means about 65% believe they should be allowed, but just with some sort of development process. Then we have a category of building things, so garage, decks, ports, sheds, and it says fencing, but it's supposed to be fence. In all those cases, 4/5 or more of the people believe those should all happen administratively or require no approval. Finally, last question, just to confirm what the planning commission and city council did was, should there be chickens allowed on residential properties? And over half believe that they should not be allowed. Surprisingly, 50% did no, which is interesting, but yeah, so those are the survey result, or summary of some of the survey results. There's a lot of ways you can splice the data. You know, we have different, you can filter out different demographics. I think the most important was responses from City of Harbor Springs residents, but it's also important to know what people in the townships thought, as well as what employees thought, because one of the things we have heard is, you know, housing for employees was been an issue. It was good to see their responses.
Well, thanks, Victor. I know people are going to have questions about the methodology and the validity, and we all do. And but let me go to the planning commission first and see if you have any takeaways or questions for Victor. Now, again, we're not taking any action on this tonight. It's just for our learning. We'll file this away. And when we come back to do the actual work in 2025, so this could be in planning commissioners, Emily.
I just want to thank you for putting that out and for all of those that took the time to take it. I'm always all about fact and information and detail to make a decision, and I feel like it's one wonderful way that we as a committee and as a city can learn what people may or may not want or different questions that were asked. And I agree, it's only one way of getting information. There's so many others, but I was happy to see the results and learn from that. Yeah, thank you.
Thoughts or comments at this point?
So it doesn't sound like we're far off with a lot of things, so yeah, I'm looking forward to working with other groups and hopefully coming something that, you know, both parties will like and everybody will vote for, so.
Okay. Well, why don't we go to the room? I know the questions on the methodology, and there's one now.
Carter Williams, 355 East Bay Street. There's a video on YouTube everyone should watch from John Bucancini. That's his proper name, from Beck and Reader, titled How Healing Divided Communities. In it, he explains how to do surveys. He's our planning advisor. If you look at YouTube, you can see it. I've got 3 statistics academic courses out of MIT. I've been applied statistics for drug discovery for aircraft you fly. The surveys using this methodology missing. When you look back at the master plan survey, as I can tell, 10% of people were over 60 who answered it. Half of our population is over 62. Just right there, you're taking the sampling error, and the conclusions you get from that are just completely wrong. So if we're going to do surveys, what John recommends, which is the proper way, is you go hire somebody from a university to do it, or somebody who's actually got the skill to do it, structure the survey correctly, correct the survey for the demographic data. So you ask things like, how old are you? Where do you live? And you make a correction to it if you're good. Otherwise, you're gonna get misinformed by the survey. So if we're going to do surveys going forward, we should do it based on the proper way to do a survey, which unfortunately this was not. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Well, I remember last time, were you a city resident?
No, is this only city resident?
No, but we were gonna do them first, so let's, but we definitely wanna hear your thoughts. Any other pictures, anybody on Zoom? Okay, yes, sir.
Oh, right. So it's just a data question, so nothing too heavy or concerning. Aaron Goppa again, West Traverse Township. I liked it. Whoever consolidated did a good job. I agree though with Carter. The only thing that concerns me being a data guy is, couldn't I, if I had an agenda, submit 20 responses? If you didn't check IP addresses, how do we verify the integrity?
I got a note on IP addresses.
So they were checked, so you. Great, if you can give us a little bit of background, just so we can feel comfortable with it. But I liked your comments too on this.
So there are 17 IP addresses, and those, I'm not an expert on IP addresses, but what I do know is the SurveyMonkey allows people on the same with the same IP address to take the survey. If you're on the same network, in a household, you know, you might have one person on one device, another person on another device, a husband and wife that can both take the survey. They limit taking the survey in the same device. So what we have here is 17 IP addresses appeared twice with substantially different answers. 3 IP addresses appeared 3 times with substantially different answers. That gave me assumption that those were different individuals in the same home or same office taking those surveys. We did have 1 IP address appeared twice with the same answers. It was from West Traverse Township. It was kind of unclear as to what their views were. They were kind of mixed. We did have 1 IP address appear 4 times with 3 surveys having the same exact responses, and they all indicated that they were against changes in 439. Again, you could assume that was the same person taking it 3 times, but you can't be sure. It could have been 3 different people in the household that felt exactly the same. So I didn't filter those IP address results out from the survey results. They were relatively minuscule. Now, that's not to say that someone could not lie about if they're a resident of Harbor Springs. They could click that they're a City of Harbor Springs resident and do the survey. It's also possible people could take it multiple times from different devices at different IP addresses. I think there's probably very little of that. I also think that while there are many different ways to conduct surveys, the point of this survey was to get a general understanding of where residents felt. We did mail it out to 250 random households. We also it was emailed out to 300 people on our city's email list and was posted in the Petoskey News Review of the month, as well as on our city website and social media. So there's plenty of opportunity for plenty of people to take it. We offered people to take it in person. And yeah, there's contemplated how to deliver the survey. You could send physical copies of surveys to households and have them mail it back and then run it through a tabulator. That's a lot of money, a lot of time. And is that much is the security of those results going to be that important compared to what the purpose of the survey is for, is to get a general understanding of where how residents feel. Also, you could, by sending out we don't know how many people live in a household, for example. We know how many voters there are, but we don't know exactly how many people live in each household. So to send only a password protected survey or one physical copy to a household, not knowing how many people live there, and with some sort of limit that might make someone else in the household feel like, why didn't they get a copy of the survey? So again, this was out there for everyone to take. We also wanted people in the townships to take it. We just wanted to have a general comparison. And actually, in my opinion, the survey results are the results are pretty evenly split. The results are pretty similar between all respondents and City of Harbor Springs responses only. I felt like it was a good telling of that's what the area's population thinks. These questions. I also looked at 20 different other communities and how they do their surveys. The vast majority do some sort of online survey with no controls. And I'm talking about surveys for zoning code updates. The vast majority do it this way with no controls. I've known one, and John Michelangelo, I know one in Akron Township. Statistical, yeah. So statistical surveys, planning commission or city council wants to spend the money and the time to do that. We can do it. This was one of the cost-effective ways to get a lot of responses from a larger group of people.
Great. Thanks, Victor. That's interesting info that I'm sure we're all going to be hashing through and figuring out what makes sense, what doesn't make sense when we get down to it. All right. Any other thoughts, Planning Commission, on the data that we've seen? Okay. And let's close out that part. And what we don't have on the agenda officially is to talk about, again, our schedule and communication and engagement and that kind of thing. Is it all right with the Planning Commission if we touch on that for a little bit before we wrap up? Good. Sounds like there was interest from the audience on that. And so this was our first December meeting. Planning Commission has a regular Planning Commission meeting again on Thursday, 12/19. So that's been on the books all year long since we set our schedule in January. And we may have some regular Planning Commission business to do there. Jeff, do we have any requests or anything?
We advertised for a public hearing for a special land use request to take place that night also.
Okay. So there's a resident request that we will be hearing, and Planning Commission will be here and we'll be doing business. The only thing related to zoning on that meeting, in our meeting plan, is to simply identify the zoning code aspects for review during the rewrite process. So no discussion, no anything else. This is the time, finally, we're gonna get to it, where people can nominate their favorite issues for a relook. And that's all that's gonna be in this meeting. So that having that done before the first of the year lets us all think a little bit about front yard setbacks. Karen is shaking her head. She's gonna be thinking about it for sure. And at least, and then we'll hit the ground running in January. We welcome our new members, get them sworn in and read in and trained on protocols and such of the planning commission. So no decisions, no examination, no negotiation. Just we get to nominate the ideas that we want to consider. So that's it. And no downside. Looks like we have some comments. Manny, you are shaking your head and scowling.
I'm just wondering, I mean, there's been several people that asked for you to table until after the new year. I know you have some business already on your agenda. And I was just wondering, you know, maybe why can't we take that under consideration when you have to? That was just great, you know.
I'm with you. For folks online who may not have been able to hear that, the question was, you know, why even take this much? Even take these steps in the December meeting when the new board is coming on. Yeah, my thought is let's just get these out. You know, we are just dying to hear what everybody wants us to consider. And it's not a closed list. It's not over. New members and anybody can suggest something going forward. So I see no downside whatsoever in just getting some things on the books. And we can think about it over the holidays. And I will. So, yes.
Karen Oldfield, Birchwood. So if we are not available on the 19th, the list that you make on the 19th can that be added to at the beginning of the year?
Yes, and it can be started remotely. So send in an email, put some things on the nomination list. No need to wait. We could start tomorrow. Okay, and then I'd like to talk a little bit more about an engagement plan. So there's been some talk about different town hall meetings and how those can occur. And I'm wide open to that. Planning Commission sounds like you're wide open to some number of more informal discussion type meetings. Great. And what we need to do then is figure out a good process for that, reasonable use of time, and a way to organize it. And so if people have some specific suggestions, now would be the time to send those in or to comment in person.
For William Space Street, the video explains this, and I think that my understanding is we had an original schedule with Beck and Reader that laid out from April 23 to October 24 how to go through the planning. And then there was a period from February 24 until July 24 where they were going to run sessions. February 24, we would show the zoning to City Council. City Council would say, basically makes sense. Then there would be several meetings with the community, probably by zoning district in a town hall session. That's sort of the way John talks about it on the video. And then that information would be incorporated back into the zoning. And then there would be a discussion in September in that original schedule or something to come up with the final zoning. That was what I believe the original contract was with Becken and Reader. That was a firm fixed price contract, $33,000. For some reason unknown, that was cut short on February 24. Beck and Reader does this everywhere. Beck and Reader has been paid on a firm fixed price contract to do this. The work has not been done. They have experience in how to do it. It seems like they should be incorporated in the conversation, or we should figure out what to do about that firm fixed price contract, because they've been paid to do the work that for some reason was cut off. So I think that that's a good basis in terms of their experience in doing these kind of matters, leveraging it. But I would say town hall sessions per zoning district is a good idea.
Okay. Well, let's put together a recommendation on that, exactly where that would fit into the schedule and how that would be done, how they'd be organized, and what resources we need. Okay, planning commissioner, you good with that? All right. Then, I'm looking at hands, no hands. Good. All right, I propose we adjourn. Who's in favor of that?